Disagreeing with your boss is one of the riskiest moves in your career path, but sometimes it is needed. You see, if done poorly, it can position you as somebody who is tactless or difficult. Done well, and it could really lead to significant outcomes for your organization. And it can also position you as a strategic thinker and a future leader. So in this video, I'm not going to talk about office politics, but I am going to talk about strategic influence. Because if you deliver a respectful, well-placed disagreement, then you can become an influencer in your organization through thoughtful dissent. First, let's talk about the 3 conventional mistakes. This is what not to do when disagreeing upwards. Now, I talk about conventional because a lot of people do one of these 3 things. The first conventional mistake is to avoid disagreement altogether. Now, I understand it feels like we need to avoid it because in a business landscape, especially when there's a hierarchy and when there's strong competition, when there is authoritative decision-making, sometimes you might second guess and feel like, well, that's not my place, or feel like, well, I don't want to risk anything. I don't want to risk a relationship or risk any reputation damages and things like that. Now, avoiding a disagreement altogether, really what there comes from, if you really think about it, it comes from a place of needing to be liked or a place of needing to be praised and avoiding criticism. And if you really think about it, that place is a place of inauthenticity, because if the more you need to be liked, the more you need people to agree with you, the more you desire praise and the more you will fear and the more you will want to avoid its opposite. And the opposite of those things are criticism and disagreement. But if you understand in the business landscape, these things are impossible to avoid. Criticism, disagreement, people saying things about you, people voicing their opinion that's contradictory to yours or clashing with yours. These things are inevitable, and they're neither right nor wrong. So you see, what happens when you avoid disagreement altogether is that you're really coming from that place of scarcity and coming from that mindset of, I'm trying to seek one thing but not the other. And what ends up happening is you have a incomplete experience of leadership. Right? So that's the first conventional mistake, is avoiding it altogether. Now, let's go to number 2. The second conventional mistake that some people make when they're faced with a call for disagreement is that they disagree bluntly. So this is blunt contradiction. And it sounds something like, no, that's wrong. Or it sounds something like, it's not possible. You haven't even thought about that. So that's blunt contradiction. Now, this type of approach really comes from a place of needing to be right, or comes from a place of seeing one side of things but not the other. So it's an incomplete perspective. It is a one-sided view, and sometimes it's unbeknownst to ourselves, and we have conviction believing that that's wrong and this is right. And this is really an opportunity to balance perspectives, an opportunity to really ask yourself questions to contradict what you might be seeing, whether there's a bias or a judgment there. So that's the source of blunt contradictions. And most of the time, blunt contradictions this way towards senior leadership and upper management don't go over too well, because it really positions you as somebody who isn't seeing the full picture of maybe you could be wrong. Maybe you're not seeing all of it. Maybe you haven't saw the other person's perspective, right? And it really breaks the conversation. It really breaks the relationship there. So that's the second conventional mistake to disagreeing upwards. And now let's go to the third conventional mistake. The third conventional mistake, this is a little bit more subtle, and it's like kind of having a hedged disagreement. So when I say this, what I mean is, like, when you come to disagreement and you're expressing yourself, it sounds like, well, I could be wrong, but I might be wrong. I'm not sure about this, but here's what I think. You see, there's a little phrase in the beginning of lack of certainty, or it sounds like, I'm not even sure myself, but I'll just tell you anyways what I think. And it comes from a place of fear, wanting to protect, or from a place of wanting to be polite. Now, I'm not saying that there's no room for being polite in the workplace relationship, but what I am saying is that having a hedged response still also prevents you from showing up fully authentic and fully yourself as well. Because if it comes from that place, again, it's similar to having the other 2 mistakes before, where you're not having a complete perspective of the whole of the situation or the value that you bring, and so you offer a hedged response. And offering this type of a hedge response doesn't position you as strongly as it could have, especially if you're missing the value that you're bringing, or you're unable to articulate really the insights that you're having. Right? So these are the 3 conventional mistakes, and we're going to go through one by one on, well, what do you do instead? Like, these are the mistakes, so what do you do now? Effective executives use a completely different playbook when it comes to disagreeing upwards. The first part of the playbook is the mindset. And the mindset piece is a little counterintuitive because a lot of people don't talk about this. The first part of the mindset comes from this notion that, well, leaders know best. If they're in that seat, if they're in the C-suite, then they must know best. And it's really an outdated notion because it's not possible for leaders to be perfect. And it's not possible for one person to know everything about everything that's needed to make any decision. So this is an outdated notion. It's time to shift away from that mindset and really embrace constructive dissent as a way of innovation, as a way of having stewardship. And the second part of the mindset of effective executives when disagreeing upwards is really a counterintuitive mindset. And it is really the truth that, you see, C-suite executives, the CEO, wants to be challenged. They want you to challenge them because they realize that effective decision-making is about constantly challenging their own perspectives, challenging their own beliefs, challenging their own opinion about what's true out there. Because with challenge, of course, through constructive and thoughtful dissent, this is when we can have our best decisions, and that's how they can tap into the collective wisdom and elevate the collective wisdom in that room. So that's why they want to be challenged. And the individuals that challenge them with the proper degree of diplomacy and thoughtfulness and insight as well, and the way of communicating on their level and thinking at the next level, those individuals who show up and challenge them are the ones that truly demonstrate organizational stewardship. The biggest question you got to ask yourself is, how do you disagree in a way that protects the relationship and positions you as having organizational stewardship? Now I'm going to present to you my PCRA framework. It's a 4-part framework on the art of constructive disagreement. So every part begins with that letter, P, C, R, and A. So the first part of the framework is P, and P stands for perception. Perception is what you see from where you stand. And it is the first filter for everyone. Every individual sees something from where they stand. And now, when I say from where they stand, I don't necessarily mean a physical location, a floor, part of the floor where they're standing. It could also be a virtual location. It could also be the metaphor from where they stand. And most often, it's going to be the metaphor from where they stand. Now, perception is the first filter. And the reason why it's the first filter is because people don't see reality for exactly the way it is. They see their version of reality filtered through a lens of what they value most. And you're going to notice that if you truly value something, and you're not just saying you value it, but your action, you truly do value it, you tend to notice everything more that's related to those values. And that's why this is the most important first step, because language and speaking up is an important part of disagreeing upwards. So when you say something, when you express your disagreement thoughtfully, you want your audience to pay attention to it, to lean in, and to give you their time. And the only way they would do that is if you understand what they value and you speak in terms of what they value, because they value it. If they value it, they will place their time there and they will give you more focus and attention. So it's important to understand this, and this is where a lot of executives get it wrong. And let me give you a concrete example. For example, if your senior leaders, the people that you are wanting to thoughtfully disagree with, if they value efficiency, they're going to see through their perception a reality where they see things in terms of efficiency, output, and time. If, on the other hand, if your senior executives value things like status and reputation, then the filter of their reality will be able to see things based on risk and image. And this is really important. The first step is to understand, well, what is it that is truly a value to them? And then the second part of this first framework is, once I understand what they truly value, then now is time for me to speak in terms of what they value. And when I do that, I'm anchoring on what they value. And I do that before I state my disagreement, before I state my opinion or what I believe to need to have correction or refinement. Before I do any of that, I must speak in terms of what they value most. Now, if you get it wrong and you're making assumptions on what they value and you're speaking, what's going to happen is that you speak, they speak, you may not hear what they say, they may not hear what you say, and it's kind of like an alternating monologue instead of a dialogue. So this part is very important. First part is perception. So you have PCRA. The next step of the framework is C, and C stands for conception. Conception is when perception becomes a little bit more complicated. You see, in the brain, in our neural networks, when we have conception, what happens is that the brain starts adding new associations to the things we perceive, and that creates a more complex and a richer experience. Now, this applies to your disagreement upwards as well, is because now that you understand their values, the next step in conception is you offer an extension of that value. So instead of offering something contradicting or opposing, so you're not opposing them, you're offering something of greater value with more association. And what happens is that through conception, you conceive of a more meaningful, of a richer idea and a solution moving forward. You see, when there is deliberation in the boardroom, and let's say you're not involved in that decision-making room, what's happening among these senior executives is that there is constructive dissent. Not everybody sees eye to eye on everything, and that's not what's required. But there is a process of, well, don't just disagree with me. What's the path forward? Chart of the path forward. And that's what CEOs want to see. They want to know that you're part of the solution, that you're not just telling them what's wrong or telling them why can't work the way it should or telling them your opposing opinion. They want to know that you see a path forward and that you're contributing to the solution, not just to the debate of why this can't be the way that it is. So conception is a really advanced skill set in terms of bigger picture thinking, in terms of drawing a more expansive and richer idea that contains a solution that we can move forward on. But in so doing, you're still expressing your insight, which may not be the same as theirs, and it may be conflicting with what theirs originally was. You're still expressing it, but you're expressing it in a way where there is conception happening. It's not just a blunt expression of, here's my opinion and here's why that's wrong. That makes sense. So then that's where we go from number 1 was perception, number 2 is conception, and then we go to the next step of the framework. If you would like to develop the skill of disagreeing upwards, but also developing that level of diplomacy and effective communication, then I invite you to work with me. Every single week, every single month, every single quarter, I offer different ways of training, mentorship, and coaching. All you have to do is click the link that you see below this video, and you're going to see a number of different options to give you the choice on exactly how you want to work with me, how you want to work with my coaching team, and what suits your time and your schedule. So have a look below, and I look forward to working with you on the inside. So we started with perception, and then we moved to conception. Now we are at letter R, and R stands for reception. Reception is simply how your challenge or your disagreement is received by your audience. Now, whenever you articulate your challenge, it could either be triggered, you can either trigger a reflex in your audience, or you can invite a reflection. Now, both reflex and reflection are very different responses. So let's talk a little bit about what they mean. If your challenge triggered a reflex in your audience, then you have a reflexive response, which is very emotional. It's just like you go to the doctor and the doctor takes one of those little hammers and hits the front of your knee with it. What happens? You kick your feet out, and you can't help it. It's a reaction. So that is a reflex. It's a knee-jerk reflex. It's the shortest distance from the brain to the spinal cord to the muscles of your leg. Now, the same thing happens in conversations as well. If what you say and the way you say it triggers reflex instead, it is a fast emotional response that doesn't go through the conscious mind. And if that trigger is a very strong trigger, then you have strong emotional reactions or weaker emotional reactions, and anything in between. It's a spectrum. So this is the first part. If it triggers a reflex, that's what it's going to look like. Now, alternatively, what you say and how you say it could invite reflection. Now, reflection is very different. Reflection happens at the higher level of the brain. Like, have you ever heard the term critical thinking, strategic thinking, right? And we talk about, well, if you want to engage in critical thinking, you have to think at a higher level. So what does it mean to think at a higher level? It means you're using the higher levels of your brain. Physically, higher up you go in your brain. And when you use your upper brain levels, you have more and more interneurons at that level. Interneurons are the neurons, the cells that communicate with the major neurons of your brain. And you have more and more of them as you go up. So this is a really important distinction, because when you use your higher brain levels, you have different alternative ways of seeing the same thing. You're able to integrate, you're able to interpret, you're able to see opposing things all at the same time because of the numbers of interneurons you have available. There is a great degree of abstractness that you can uphold, that you can interpret and you can appreciate, versus if you're thinking from lower levels of your brain, like the reflex response, it's the amygdala, and it's most of the time it's more black and white, all or none. The knee just kicks out when the hammer hits it. All right, so reflection, when you invite reflection, you and your audience are thinking from higher levels of the brain, and it's not just a fast emotional response, that reactivity. It's not like that. It's like, well, let's reflect. Let's hold opposing views simultaneously. Let's look at everything that we can see. Let's ensure that we are having checkpoints and balances on our biases and judgments. Let's dare to ask ourselves, what are we missing? So this is a highly iterative response, and we're capable of reflecting on our own consciousness. We're capable of reflecting on our own emotions and reflecting on our own behaviors. So that's reflectiveness. The goal of effectively disagreeing upwards is to either move your boss's reaction from one of reflex to one of reflection, or to maintain their current reflection so that it doesn't go backwards into reflex. Now, here's the thing. You can't control someone else's reaction. You can only control your own. So you might be thinking, well, then what do I do? If my boss is going to be reactive in front of me, there's nothing I can do. And if they're going to be reflective, and if I can't do anything to prevent it from going to reaction, there's nothing I can do. Then what's the point of this? If you're thinking this, well, I have good news for you. Here's the thing, and this is a principle of life. If you deliver your communication reactively, you will receive a reactive response. If you deliver your communication reflectively, you will receive a reflective response. And here's why that principle is true. It's because you cannot lead others until you first lead yourself. If you don't have governance over your own thoughts, if you don't have governance over your own reflective activities, if you don't have governance over your own emotions and your own biases and your own judgments, then the way you show up and the way you deliver your disagreements or your arguments are going to reflect that. And what you output is what you receive in turn, synchronistically. So the choice is yours. If you desire to effectively lead your boss and to disagree upwards and have that conversation to go with the utmost reflection and critical thinking and thoughtfulness, then that's how you have to show up. Even when you're not with them, by yourself, of yourself, that's how you show up for yourself every day before you can show up for others. And the question you got to ask yourself is, are you aware of your own judgments? Are you aware of your self-mastery and your level of consciousness? Are you aware of your own biases and your own behaviors and your beliefs? Are you aware of them? And that's where it starts. It's not about trying to control other people's reactions. It really is trying to understand the things you are in control of. And the only thing you can control in this world are your own reactions and your own behaviors. Now we're on the final step of the framework, which is the letter A. And A stands for apperception. Apperception is balanced integration. It is where perception, conception, and reception all come together integrated as a balanced whole. And this is when your higher up, the one that you are disagreeing with, your higher up in that moment can still hold their original value, and at the same time, they no longer see you as contradicting authority or challenging authority, but they can see how what you've shared and what you have stated is really contributing to the mission, all at the same time. So it's an integrated whole. And this is where it becomes both and instead of either or. You see, when both parties involved are reflecting instead of reacting, this is where you have apperception, the integration, the balance of integration that transforms challenge into balance and appreciation. The balance part comes from seeing both sides of it, not just one side of the argument, his side, my side, her side, yours or mine, but a balance. And appreciation comes from the notion that you're not trying to change them and trying to change their perspective and trying to change who they are, and vice versa. They're also not trying to change you and not trying to change who you are. And that's where appreciation comes from. So when both parties are reflecting and not reacting, you can have that type of balance and appreciation. Apperception is the integration point. It's when your challenge, which is what you came to them in the first place to disagree on, and their intent, which is what they wanted to do all along, both of those things come together and it integrates into balanced clarity. And when I say balanced clarity, balance, like I said before, means that you and they see both sides of things. They see your side, you see their side. There's an appreciation, so that's balance. And there's balanced clarity. Clarity means now we know what the decision we are going to make is. We have elevated our collective intelligence together in this room. All of us have elevated our intelligence, the level of intelligence in this room, and we're making a decision because not one person could have made this decision. We all needed to come together and share our insights. And although our insights are opposing one another, they're not the same, but because we were reflecting, we were able to have different interpretations of the same thing, which is needed to make an effective decision. And that's when we have clarity. In summary, it's a 4-part practice for disagreeing upwards. Step number 1 is aligning through perception. Number 2 is framing through conception. Number 3 is regulating for reflection. And number 4 is integrating with apperception. When you practice this 4-part framework, you are not only disagreeing upwards, but you're positioning yourself as a strategic influencer, a critical thinker, someone capable of thoughtful dissent, and an effective executive.